Thank you for joining us in continuing conversations about central ideas and common questions about student growth percentiles, or SGPs. In this video, we're going to take a look at something that is often misunderstood, and that is the role of prior test scores, particularly those tests that come from previous school years. Because when you are looking at SGP scores for students, there are certain reports and dashboards where you may see references to the prior tests that are used in calculating that score. And it is possible within the current school year to see a reference to a test from a previous school year. For many teachers, this seems perplexing. They ask us, why would you possibly use a prior test score from a previous school year when I wasn't even teaching the student? Why would you use that as part of the consideration of growth that the student has achieved with me? In their mind, they're viewing that prior test score from a previous year as a starting point. But that's not exactly how those prior test scores are used. Let me explain to you why we use them and how they are used. So we've been working through an example with this student, Krista. She's in grade 7, and we know that in SGPs, as we discussed in a prior video, we compare her to her academic peers. And at that point, I gave you the first two elements that always applies to academic peers. They are always students that are in the same grade level, and they are always students who started out at roughly the same scale score point. So other kids who started out where Krista started. That's the two required elements. But if there is more information, if we have prior test scores from previous windows, we can use those prior test scores to determine more about Krista's history of performance. And if we know more about her history of performance, we might be able to refine or even more appropriately improve her academic peer group. Let me illustrate for you. Let's say again that it's the winter. Krista achieved a scale score of 775 on STAR Reading or STAR Math. In the fall, she had begun the year at a 742, and we're attempting to say something about how much she has grown. Again, in an absolute sense, we know that she's grown 33 scale score points. So the SGP model would say, let's find other students in the same grade level who started at roughly the same point. You see them illustrated there. We would then look at who grew more, who grew less, where Krista fell within the distribution, and we would calculate her SGP if that's all that we knew for her. But what if we have a longer testing history for Krista? Should we use that, and how? Well, here is how the SGP model uses second prior test scores. If an additional score from one more testing window is available, then the SGP calculation uses that to refine the student's peer group, not as their starting point. We're always calculating something about Krista's growth from fall to winter, but if we have a longer history for Krista, we can use that to refine her peer group. Let me illustrate it for you. Again, if we have her winter score and her fall score, we know something about how she grew from fall to winter. But let's suppose we have one more, a second prior test scores from Krista. We could look back and find out where she and her other peer group members began. And what we find is some students in her peer group actually began 2 windows back a little bit further ahead than she was, or a little bit further behind than she was. And what we find is the students on this line, and then again that line at the fall, those are the most appropriate ones to compare her growth to. And so in this sense, the second prior test allows us to filter out some students who may not be the very, very best comparison that we can make for her. And in that sense, we refine or slim down her peer group to students who have had a longer historical growth pattern to Krista, so that when we again look at her growth from fall to winter, we do so with this refined peer group, able to produce an even more refined or more precise SGP for her. So again, the SGP calculation does use prior test scores that may come from a previous window, but the important thing is we do not use those test scores as a starting point. We simply use that second prior test score to further refine the peer group. That's how they are used, and that's how they produce an even better SGP for you.